Sorry, needed a drink of water. Well, we're going to leave our series we've been on for the last 4 weeks called Turning Your Work into Worship. And I'd actually like to camp it around a little bit longer, but I'm going to move on, and maybe we'll come back to it sometime, because I really think we're onto something there. What do you think? You know, we're so often so church-focused and so Sunday-focused. And out of that, I think one of the things that I felt I've had a fresh revelation on is the fact that one of our greatest opportunities to worship God is through your work. And one of the greatest opportunities you'll ever have for ministry is your work. And one of the greatest opportunities you'll ever have for personal spiritual growth is your work. Who's found that to be true? And so don't forget it. We're going to move on, but don't forget it. Today, I'm going to move on, and we're going to leave poor old Cindy behind us. For those of you who weren't watching last week, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about. We're going to move on, and the next few weeks, we're going to talk around. I've just called these short series, I've called it The Second Question. The Second Question. You can tell a lot about a nation, about what it values, its culture, its psyche, by its monuments. If you go to Europe, travel around Europe, you see lots of monuments to kings, generals, kind of people that have really way out there, kind of leadership type people. If you go to USA, you've got statues of Washington and Lincoln and generals. You go to any park and there's usually a general on a horse somewhere. In fact, Americans have taken it, everything's bigger and better in the States, right? They've taken it to another whole level, and they just didn't make a monument. They turned a mountain into a monument. Mount Rushmore. You got a picture of Mount Rushmore? There it is. Look at that. 4 American presidents. I've heard they're actually doing a 5th one. Can we just have the next picture? There it is. There it is. They're working on it. There you go. So, could you imagine if we did that in Australia? Kind of wouldn't feel somehow, people would say, well, that's un-Australian. We don't make statues and monuments kind of to lead. Imagine if you went to Kangaroo Point, to the rocks at Kangaroo Point, and you carved in the side, there was a big picture of Menzies and Howard and Hawke, and they would have been busy the last 10 years, wouldn't they? Kind of like, I just finished one, we're making another one. But if you start looking around Australia and start looking at Australian monuments, you discover different things. We tend not to have monuments of great leaders and that, like we've just talked about. But Australia's best known monuments are, you can take that down. You can take that down now. Australia's best known monument is probably Simpson and his donkey. He's actually, for those of you who don't know, this is not the land of your birth. This is just a little brief history. He's probably Australia's best known soldier, and he wasn't a general or a Victoria Cross winner. He was a stretcher bearer. He was a medic in World War I on the hills of Gallipoli. His name was Private John Simpson. This is one of the best known monuments in Australia. His name is Private John Simpson Kilpatrick. He was a stretcher bearer from the 3rd Australian Field Ambulance Brigade. Go Ambulance Brigade. How about that? There you go. We might have a statue to you one day. And he became a well-known figure in that battlefield we know as Gallipoli, in the hills and trenches of Gallipoli. And he was known for, there is this actual photo of him. He became very well known because he was famous for rescuing his mates, people who were injured. He would get out there with his donkey with bullets flying around him, and he would load injured mates onto his donkey and get them down to the hospital until 1915, where he too was killed in that battlefield. So Simpson and his donkey. So that's probably one of Australia's best known. Probably the other really well known one in Australia is this one here. The dog on the tucker box. We're really up there, us Aussies, aren't we? I mean, who else makes a statue of a dog sitting on it? It's called the dog on the tucker box, but it's a lunchbox, okay? Let's put it in. Who else would make a statue of a dog on a lunchbox? If it was my dog, he'd steal the lunch. I mean, it's kind of, the old dog on the tucker box, and that's in the town of Gundagai down in New South Wales. And of course, it was made in honour of man's best friend. Like the drover's dog. The early drovers in that area that drove cattle and sheep around the area, and they loved their dogs, and their dogs were like so that's actually a picture of a dog guarding. And the story was the dog guarded the lunchbox, the tucker box. We like to call it tucker. Anyone had some tucker lately? The dog would guard the tucker box and not let anything else touch the man's lunch. That's a real friend, isn't it? And so much so they made a statue, the dog on the tucker box. We're doing all right, aren't we, us Aussies? What else? There's one other monument which I think is probably really well known in Australia, and that is, in fact, there's more than one, but you find one in any small town you go to. You'll find in any centre of a small town, you'll find a World War I memorial. True? Do you know there's over 1,500 of them across Australia? You imagine the logistics and the work and the time and the care and effort that went into that. There's 1,500 of them across Australia, and they're in small towns. They're also, of course, in the cities, but they're right across. You drive in a little town out in the middle of nowhere, there's a World War I memorial statue. And in fact, so much so that Australia has been called a nation of small town memorials. It's quite something, isn't it? People who come here from overseas, they've called it a nation of just small town memorials. And of course, that commemorates a nation then of just 5 million people. 5 million was the size of our nation. And 416 something thousand people volunteered to go and fight in a war on another shore in another land. And of those 416,000, in a nation of 5 million people, 160,000 became casualties. And so wounded, injured, and of that 160,000, 60,000 of them were killed. And so you imagine that many people, and imagine the ongoing effects of that in a nation of only 5 million people. No wonder right across the nation of Australia you find these memorials right across our nation, because there was hardly a family anywhere, in any town, in any place that wasn't affected by it. And so all of that, I've said that today to try and give you a little bit of an idea of what's important to Aussies, what's important to Australia, what's something that we value. And it all says this, that Aussies put a high value on their mates. They put a high value on mateships, on their friends. The thing we value the most is our mates. They're the people we rely on the most. When we really need help, it's not a leader that we're going to rely on, it's our mates. That's kind of like Aussie mentality. Jack's as good as his master. We can do that. We'll take care of him. Don't worry, mate. We've got it. I use an old Aussie term, cobber. We'll look after him. Now, I know I'm going back, and if you weren't, if this is not the land of your birth, some of these might be new terms, but I think it's important to understand the culture in which we live. So how does that work in the context of church? Think about that thinking, Simpson and his donkey, common man, mates that died for one another together on a cause. Monuments spread right throughout our nation in small towns. What's God's perspective on this? How does this figure out in the church? Well, we tend to, in Christian circles, we might not use the term mates, we might use the term brother and sister. They're our brothers and they're our sisters. Is that kind of like Christian terminology? Talk about our brothers and our sisters. Of course, you're a part of the family of God, and we're all brothers and we're all sisters. So I think this morning, I just want to go back to Genesis again. We saw where the beginnings of work began, and in Genesis, and I just want to look at what God's perspective on this is this morning, because I think it's really helpful to us. It helps us get an understanding of what we're to be about as a church. And I'm going to read Genesis chapter 4, verses 8 to 10. Genesis chapter 4, verses 8 to 10, and it goes as follows. And it's the story about Cain and Abel. We're not going to read everything leading up to it. I'd love to. It's quite powerful, and there's so much to learn out of it. But just let's cut to the chase. Now, it says, now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out to the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. And then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? I don't know, he replied. Am I my brother's keeper? The Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Am I my brother's keeper? Was Cain's answer to the question of where is your brother? First question God asked us was in chapter 3. Go back a chapter. It was the first question that God asked mankind was this. He says, Adam, he says, where are you? Remember the story? Adam sinned, goes and hides. God says, Adam, where are you? And it wasn't like God lost Adam. It's like, oh, dang, I don't know where I put him. It was God saying, was God asking Adam. Adam needed to know where Adam was. And he says, Adam, where are you? And so that's the first question God asks of us. It's in relationship to God, where are you this morning? Where are you? That'd be my first question I would want every one of us to answer is, where are we this morning in relationship to God? Are we hiding from God? Do we trying to pretend he doesn't exist? Do we think he's kind of some mean, judgmental being waiting to whack us? Where are you today in relationship to God? That'd be the first question, and I would ask you to give consideration to that this morning. But the second question that God asks was the question he asked Cain. Where is your brother? You might say this morning, well, the first question, well, that's easy. In relationship to God, I'm all good. God and me, hey, no worries. It all ends there. It's just about me and Jesus. God and I are good. But the second question follows that question, which says, where is your brother? You're also accountable this morning, church. We are also accountable this morning, not only for where we stand before God, but we are accountable for our brothers and our sisters. Cain answered by saying this. He says, am I my brother's keeper? Am I my brother's keeper? He's kind of saying, well, what's it to do with me? Why would you be asking me that question? Go and ask Adam. But God was asking Cain for good reason, because we are also accountable for our brothers, our sisters, our mates, our friends. And Cain answered, as many of us maybe this morning would possibly answer, say, am I my brother's keeper? Not my business. I wish my brother had read this. Wish my brother had taken this on board. My brother nearly killed me. He was his brother's keeper, all right. He was going to kill me and keep me. I remember one day taking me when I was about 7 years old. I had my push bike. He was 6 years older than me, right? You do the sums, 13. We grew up on a farm. It was pretty hilly sort of country. In fact, it was quite very hilly country. We were right at the foothills. I was born in a little town called Mount Beauty. Right at the foothills of Falls Creek, which is the premier ski resort in Victoria. So it's beautiful alpine sort of country. And our farm's very hilly. And my brother took me over this really steep hill on our farm, and he says, and he's on his bike and I'm on mine, and he gets to the top and he goes, I'll race you to the bottom. And I went, yeah, rightio. He goes, ready, set, go. He rode about 5 feet and then stopped because only idiots would ride down a hill like that. What did his young brother do? Woo! Down the hill, like legs and arms flying everywhere, and a big pile at the bottom. And he's up with eyes like Buick hubcaps going, I've killed my brother. I wish he'd read that. Never mind. I remember him saying to another, something to do with hills. He said to me, I'll give you a race to roll down the hill. I said, yeah, okay. You think I would have learnt by now, wouldn't you? And he says, but because I'm older and probably faster, I'll give you a head start. He says, you lie here, and you say go when you go when I say go, and then I'll start up here, and you get a head start. Didn't even think to look down the hill. He put me above a big fresh cow manure, and he goes, ready, set, go. Never mind. I can remember it to this day. I wish my brother had read that. Never mind. Enough of the stories. Let's get on with the message. It was significant that the first murder that took place was between not a man and a woman, not between a husband and a wife, but between two brothers. And ever since Cain killed Abel, listen to me carefully, brothering has been under assault. And it still is today. And now when I say that, there are obvious ways in which brothering is under assault. You know, there's division. People live divided lives, and there's, hurts, and there's falling outs. I often hear people say, oh, they've fallen out. They've fallen out. So there's those kind of obvious things. But I'm looking at it this morning from the perspective of brothering as something that is undervalued and underutilized. It's undervalued and underutilized, particularly when it comes to the church. And let me explain why I'm saying that. And here's my big idea this morning. We place a higher value on pastoring than we do on brothering. Just let that settle on us for a moment. Now, you need to know today that, let me just say that one more time. We place a higher value on pastoring than we do on brothering or sistering. Now, it hasn't always been that way. The church hasn't always been that way. I talked about it a couple of weeks ago about during the reign of the Emperor Constantine, in Roman history, the emperor of the Roman Empire, who became a Christian and tried to sort of give a lot of help to the church. What was help we didn't want. He gave the leaders robes and titles and special architecture, and they were the paid professionals, the clergy and the laity. They just had to, turn up and listen, and so there were the clergy were the paid professionals. They were the ministers. The rest of the church, they just received from the ministers. Remember me talking about that? Well, not only did that work, in relationship to our work, but when it comes to caring for one another, there was a shift that took place, whereas in the early Testament church, they cared for one another. You read through all the one another's in Scripture, they cared and looked out for one another, whereas when Constantine come along and suddenly separated the leaders from the laity, suddenly all the care and all the help and it all became professionalized, and you had to go and then see the professional. They put the church to sleep. And we stopped becoming our brother's keeper. That's the pastor's job. That's the pastor's job. So this morning, I just want to talk just a little bit, really practically, about what brothers, sisters actually do for each other. And need to do for each other. First one is that brothers look out for each other. As I said before, Cain said, am I my brother's keeper? God didn't ask Adam because Adam wasn't present. He asked Cain, he asked a brother about a brother. And Cain's kind of like, as I said, he's kind of like, why are you asking me? Am I responsible for my brother? Am I accountable? The answer is really, it's implied is yes, you are. You are accountable for your brother. That's why I'm asking you. You wouldn't have asked him if you didn't want an answer. And so the problem is, as I said, we put brothering on lower value. We put it on we have a lesser value of brothering than we do pastoring. And we leave what brothers and sisters should do, can do, did do, up to pastors. You need to see the pastor. You need to see the professional. Can I just say it's a leftover from Constantine? Now, I'm not decreasing this morning the value of pastoring. God has given pastors, teachers, evangelists, prophets, apostles for the building up of the saints to do the work, of the ministry. I'm not devaluing pastors. We have a role. However, what I'm trying to do is increase the value of brothers and sisters. So I'm not being disrespectful of anybody this morning. I'm just helping us to see what should be, what can be, what will be in the church, the way God intended it to be. Brothers, look out for each other. I just want you to know this morning that you can do this. We can do this. I love in the movie Croc Dundee. We're really getting into the meaty stuff this morning. And Hogs is at a party in New York. And someone's talking to him about seeing their shrink. Using that term. And they asked Paul asked Croc Dundee. Paul Hogan, it wasn't Paul Hogan, it was Croc Dundee. They asked him, don't you have a shrink? And he goes, no. He says, I go and see Wally. And Wally listens. We have a talk, and that seems to take care of it. Then he kind of says, well, don't you have mates? Don't you have mates? I just want you to know, even if you're a bit of a Wally, we're all capable of looking out for each other. We're capable of it. Like I said, we can be Wallies. I'm a bit of a Wally. We can be a Wally. How many know Wally can do a lot of good? We can care for each other. And so, 2 Corinthians 3:6 puts it this way. It says that we are able ministers. Talking to the church, not talking to particular pastors, or he's talking to the church. And Paul says, we are able ministers of the new covenant. Once upon a time, the old covenant was all about the law and the priest and everything they did. No, we are all able ministers of the new covenant. We can take care of one another. We can minister to one another. We can be brothers and sisters keepers. Are you hearing me this morning? Number one, brothers look out for each other. Number two, brothers are accessible. Brothers are the most basic level of relationships. Now, I know this morning when I talk about this, you may have, I don't know what your situation is with brothers, and maybe, as I said, brothering's been under attack ever since this. I don't know what your relationship with your brothers are, but let's just, on face value, brothers are the most basic level of relationship in life. It's not positional, although that's not totally true. I had a big brother and I had a little brother. There's a little bit of position going on there, isn't it? But you hear what I'm saying. It's not positional. It's not hierarchical. You don't need an appointment. It's spontaneous, right? And it happens to us all. It happens around us all the time. Brothering is accessible and available, listen, where the professional is not. This is a key point. Now, I know we're all socially distanced this morning, but under normal circumstance, I could ask you to reach out and touch each other. Don't do it because we're all on that little camera there. But without too much trouble, some of us might have to go a little bit further. But the fact is, if we wanted to, we could reach out this morning. We could touch each other. Am I right? Okay, now I want you to all just stay where you are and reach out and touch me. You can't. That was an object lesson, okay? Did I do well? You like object lessons? You can touch brothering mates without even leaving your seat. But you can't touch pastoring sometimes without making an appointment. Does this make sense? It's not as easy to reach me. But the fact is, some people would sometimes rather die in a queue waiting to see a pastor or a prophet or something rather than a brother who is close by. Now, I'm not saying that this morning because I don't want to be a pastor and that I don't care. Quite the opposite. But, I said we value pastoring over brothering. Let me give you a classic example. It's kind of like you can get someone who's sick and they have 12 people from the church come and visit them, take food around, care for them, and the next minute you hear that they've left the church because the pastor didn't come and see them. And there's no love in that church. That pastor doesn't care. You see, my job is not to personally care for everybody. My job is to make sure that everybody is personally cared for. And it's not about the paid professional and the clergy. And let's just get the pay. We don't pay someone, you don't pay me to do the job so that you don't have to do it. I'm here to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. Hello? So I'm not trying to get out of work here. It's just the way the body's meant to work. Is this making sense this morning? The pastor should visit me. Who told you that? The pastor shall visit the sick, the 11th commandment. Some days, if I prayed for you, you would die. Hey, but listen, there's somebody in your life group, somebody who, your brother or your sister who has faith for you that day, who could come and they could pray for you and God could do something. But it's like, oh no, we've got to get the pastor. Hey, come on, church. Constantine, let's bury him. He's been dead for a long time. Let's really bury him. Let's bring back the church the way it's meant to be. Am I my brother's keeper? Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Somebody should visit the sick. I visit the sick. I do visit the sick. I remember saying this once in a previous church, and I said, hey, listen, if I come to visit you, you need to be really worried. You need to be picking hymns. And that afternoon, I got a call from somebody who was desperately ill in the hospital, and I had to go and visit them. And I walked in there going, oh no, it's worse than I thought. The pastor's here. I'm making light of it, but you're getting this morning. Please, we are brothers and sisters. We are the body of Christ. Everyone wants to see the professional, and the professional's worn out, yet you can be getting all the help you need from the people who do life with you. That's why it's called a life group. Brothers are so accessible. Value it as a gift from God. I get people come and see me sometimes, and it's kind of like we have a conversation and I'll say something, they'll go, actually, yeah, my friends have been saying that for years. I go, hello? We've got to learn to value our brothers and our sisters. Like I said, I'm not trying to devalue pastoring. I understand the role of a pastor. I'm just saying today, we've got to raise the value of brothers and sisters. Let me give you one more. As mates, you have a bigger purpose than just being mates. Now, it's important that a church has good pastoring, has good love and care. And I know we're not perfect, and I'm probably more aware of the holes than many of you. But I believe this church, we're trying our best to give good love and care as best as we can. And I really believe that you'll find it here. But love and care, listen to me really carefully. Please don't run out the church when I say this screaming. Love and care is not what the church is about. But by their love for one another, people will know that we're your disciples. Yes. It's a part of the package, but it's not the focus. It's a means to an end, not the end itself. The church is not a hospital. That's going to really scare the devil with our back the front gown and our oxygen mask and the pills. Look out, devil, we're coming to get you. No, listen. It has a medical core, but it's there to fix you up and get you back into the battle. Simpson, the donkey man, went and picked up wounded soldiers, took them to the medical corps, they fixed them up and put them back in the front line. Are you hearing me today? You will find care here, but not by hanging around, waiting for it, saying, look at me, look how wounded I am. We will all find it when we get involved in the purpose and the building of the church. We start to fight in the cause together. You will find that you will have more help than you ever needed. Listen to Ephesians 4:16. From him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. Are you hearing me this morning? Of course, if someone's wounded, of course we want to do our best we can. Of course, but listen, the care and the love is not the end in itself. It's to get us all back into the greater cause, which is winning a lost and dying world. That's why Jesus came. Can I hear a good amen? In Nehemiah, we read about them rebuilding the broken down walls, and they worked with, in one hand they held a trowel, and in the other hand they held a sword. And as they built up the broken walls of their life with a trowel, at the same time fighting the enemy with a sword in the other. Listen, we all have our broken down walls, am I right? We all have brokenness in our lives, and we join in, we work, and we build together. And as we do that, we find the ministry and the help that we need as we work together. The church is not a jet. Sorry, Dave. It's not a jet with 200 passengers drinking, eating, enjoying the ride with 10 people running around looking after them. It's not. No, it's not. It's all hands on deck as we work together. And look what takes place when we do. Can we look in Luke chapter 5 verse 4 and 7. I love this. It says, when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into the deep water and let down the nets for a catch. And Simon answered, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so. You can hear that, can't you? I will let down the net. And when they had done so, listen, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in other boats to come and help them. And they came and filled both so full that they began to sink. Wow. Think about that. They had a net, starts catching fish. And they start catching fish, but their nets weren't up to the task. And what happened? They start losing fish. Who can see that? Nets weren't strong enough. The nets began to break. I remember when I was youth pastor in Toowoomba many years ago, we had a large youth group of kids. And I remember all this large group of kids turning up every Saturday night. And I used to say, God, how can I take care of all these? How can I make sure all these kids find a place and a connection? And I remember reading that, and as clear as a bell, it was like, build a net that won't break. Build a net that won't break. And do you know what that net's built up with? It's built up with you and I. We are the net. He said it's signaled to their partners, their brothers, their mates, and they come and they let down their nets, and they started to catch all the fish that they wouldn't hold, the fish that they would have normally not caught and would have got away. The strength of the net, listen. The strength of the net, listen. The strength of the net was in the relationship. Did you hear that? That's the strength of the net. Relationships hold the fish. And that's why the church is a network of relationships working together to catch fish. You're underwhelmed, aren't you? It's a relational net. And God wants you to be a part of the net. Am I my brother's keeper? My pastor's my brother's keeper. No. We are our brother's keeper. We are our sister's keeper. God wants you to be a part of the net. Here's the thing. We can't care for them all. You can't care for them all. You were never meant to care for them all. You know what? I remember taking on a church years ago. It was about 50 strong. And I soon worked out that you only needed one crisis, maybe two crises to happen in that group. And I would not personally be physically able to give them the care and attention and love that they actually needed. But there was people around them together that could do way better than waiting for the paid professional to take care of it. Did you get that this morning? So enable for churches to grow, we have to be self-caring. We have to be our brothers and sisters' keeper. And so we're not meant to care for them all, but we are all meant to care for a few. And your part is to be a part of the net. Because the net's only as strong as where you are. And your part is to reach out your hand, offer love, friendship, grace, listen, reach out. And not only as you're a part of something like that, listen to me carefully, not only will you receive encouragement, support, care, friendship, fun, working together around a cause, but you'll also be a supplier. Everyone say supplier. A supplier of encouragement, support, care, friendship, fun, work together with a cause. So how do we do that in this church? We do it through a network of life groups. That's our net. That's our net. And there's a place for everyone. There's a place for everyone. Because nothing breaks my heart more when I see people come in and they're here for a period of time and they find they just can't seem to find a connection, can't break in. Now sometimes when people come in, there's a responsibility from them, yes? You can't just expect it all to come to you. However, we want to be a part of a church that is actively facilitating and making it possible for people. So I've said many times, people aren't looking for a friendly church, they're looking for friends, and those two things are miles apart. We can be friendly for a while on Sunday, but how many of you know that it takes something else to open your circle and to allow people to come into that circle? And some of the best people for future people to find friendships in is new people themselves. Be a part of the answer. And so, unashamedly today, and that's what the new church did. The New Testament church did. They met in the temple, and they met, what else did they meet in? They cared for one another in a small group environment. It's two wings of the one bird. And so we've got a great network of life groups in the church. Got some great people running. In fact, we've got a couple that just started one recently. Where's Centane? Centane, come on. Centane and Aaron run a group. This is Centane unmasked. Centane, you recently just started a life group, correct?
Yes. Is this on?
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
How's it all going? Why did you start a group in the first place?
So Aaron and I, we're young families, or we're 30-ish, midlife-ish, and there's a need in that group, and there wasn't enough small groups. So every time we'd go to the park and meet and have coffee with the families and play in the playground, it was great. But then I heard the women, we were talking about the fact that we needed something deeper. And so we needed to be meeting, and we were all saying that ourselves, going, we need to be meeting, we need to be discussing something more than, oh, what play school, school you're going to? Oh, that's good. Oh, and what do you put in lunch boxes? Yeah. And so Aaron and I we're now running 2. He runs men's and I run women's.
That's awesome. And how's that working out for you?
It's good. So Aaron's the tech one, and he's rigged up the lounge room. So we've got it, half our groups are Zoom enabled. And so you can, if you're on Zoom, you can see our lounge. And so there's 3 or 4 of us on the lounge and my women's one, and a couple online. And then the same with Aaron's men's group. And so that means if you're a parent and you're solo parenting for the night, or you're solo parenting normally, you can still come. Or it means in COVID, when somebody's sick or somebody goes, my kids are sick and I think it's contagious, please stay home. Everyone goes, would love to see you on Zoom.
Brilliant. How good's that? Well done, Centane and Aaron. Good job. Well, it was Aaron.
With the baby.
He's up the back with young Etty, and good on you guys.